Participate in a conversation with once conservative, now liberal Midwest mastered prepared special education high school teacher and a self-proclaimed devil's advocate, East Coast conservative liberal, baccalaureate prepared registered nurse. These two strangers met, became instant friends, and realized their conversations are candid and epic. So join us weekly, ask us questions, and listen to these profoundly candid friends try to solve the world's problems, one discussion at a time.
Hey, welcome to another exciting week of The New Theory with Monet and Jared. That's TNT with MJ. I am Jared.
I'm Monet.
And together we are teaching minds
and nurturing souls.
And we have the honor this week of having independent candidate for senator in the state of Arkansas, Mr. Dan Whitfield, joining us today. Going to give a couple of, yes, absolutely, give a couple of notes, prefaces right off the top of the here. This will go a little longer than what we usually do, but we want to give Mr. Whitfield as much time as we could possibly give him in his schedule to say what it is that's on his mind and convey to the people of Arkansas what his platform is and where he's coming from. And also, with that being said, he is also currently working still. So if he has to take off real quick to answer a phone call or respond to a text message, we will give him that time and that consideration to do that. So with that being said, Mr. Dan Whitfield, thank you for joining us this week.
Hey, good morning. Honestly, the honor's all mine. Thank you all so much for having me, Jared and Monet.
Excellent.
Our pleasure.
Oh man, we're totally stoked and to be able to sit down with you and visit with you and get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and just get us going right off the top here. First question for you, Mr. Whitfield. Can we call it? Do you prefer Mr. Whitfield, or can we be a little bit more informal?
You can just call me Dan.
Cool. Just that just makes it less syllables. That's all. I'm teasing. So Dan, have you had opportunity to explore not only what implicit bias is, but discover your own? I don't know if you remember this or not, but it was several weeks ago. I was part of your Facebook Live update Q&A thing, and I specifically asked you if what you knew of implicit bias, and I believe the response was that you weren't familiar with it at the time, but you would look into it. So this is my follow-up question. Have you had that opportunity to do so and explore your own on top of that?
I have not, but I have notes for it right here now.
Okay.
Let's see here. So defining implicit bias, also known as implicit social cognition, implicit bias refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions as an unconscious manner. So it's an easy basis to get.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that we face as American citizens is a lot of conditioning from the time we are very small children until today as adults. We're conditioned in many different ways, and a lot of those ways really helps build what our social structure looks like. So what we need to make sure that we're doing is, we are getting some feedback.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too. So let me try this.
Awesome. So one of the things we really need to do is we need to be careful on how we are projecting the ways that we want our society to look to our children, because there are actually many countries in the European Union where you can't even advertise to children. It's insane. You can't advertise food or toys or anything like that. They have to be all ads over 18 because it helps allow children to build their own, I guess, I don't want to use the word implicit bias.
Understanding?
But, yeah, it allows them to build up their own understanding and views of the world and what they want it to be. What a hard topic.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, one of the biggest things that we need to understand is that like racism and hatred, they're not inherent. It's not something we just are born with. They are diseases that are put onto us. They're problems that are learned and taught to us as children and adults. And we need to make sure that we are not allowing our children to be susceptible to that kind of implicit bias where they think it's okay to, I mean, I hate to say, but be racist, but
No,
that's
you're absolutely
the
right.
problem a lot of children are facing today.
Or bias on anything. Like, you know, I'd rather have all, like, I need my food to be multicolored instead of, like, you know, like fluorescent colored. Because notice when you look at the advertisements on television, you'll see that, like, they'll have, like, I don't want to use labels, but I'm just going to say, like, foods that have, like, these hyper colorations in them that kind of gear towards a child's desire. And then all of a sudden they, you know, I don't know, they want to only eat foods that have color in it, or instead of saying being open to just trying anything that you put in front of them. It's like they've already been conditioned from the time they have a level of understanding through the television, like, you know, oh, these are the things that are geared towards me, and I don't have a say. I don't have to think. It's almost like their thought process is done for them. This is a very see, this is the teacher's question.
It's important though, because, you know, then you get into philosophy and sociology, and it is really important that we do start to recognize that we do have a problem of systemic racism. And, you know, the racism, that's a symptom. What is the root cause of the problem, and how do we start solving the problem? That way we no longer have that symptom that we're dealing with on our everyday lives.
Exactly. That's yeah, so that leads to the next question. Then just to follow up on that one, for you, Dan, when would be, since we're talking about kids and developing their mentalities, their beliefs, their biases, when would be too young, in your opinion, to start having that conversation to counter the conditioning or socialization that you hinted to earlier? Because we were all conditioned, we were all socialized into that system. And so to counter that with our own children,
I think it's really going to depend on many different things. I mean, if you are say a white couple with a white child here in America, that conversation is probably going to happen after. If you were a African American couple or a Hispanic couple or a not white couple, you know, talking to your children, because our children are experiencing different things because of this already. My daughter, she's half white and half Filipina. She's the only Asian American in her school. So this is a talk that we already had, because she already had other children talking to her about it before we had a chance. And then she brought the question to me. So it's really going to, you know, depend on the different circumstances. I don't think it can be a set age for a child.
Sure.
Unless we all started to have these talks with our children at a certain age at the same time, which would maybe be a really good idea for, say, kindergarten chats. That way we can help children understand that, yeah, we're all a little bit different, but we're all still the same.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. We're all, I mean, if you want to get into it, we're all created equal and under God's eye or un God's eyes, you know, so.
But, you know, we have and this is me being devil's advocate. I didn't mean to cut you guys off.
No, absolutely.
You have a section of the country, rather large section of the country, where minorities are almost non-existent. And so they're only, you know, there's white people that are surrounded by their likeness. So it's like when I hear as a minority, you say we have to get to the root cause of, well, not necessarily the root cause, but yeah, the root cause of what causes racism, then it begs to say, yeah, a white person has to be in an environment, I think, to help them ask that question, because they can ask that question all day long. If there's nobody with minority experiences or that has an interaction with a minority, it's literally two people asking themselves a question that they can't answer. Okay. And you can think, okay, so when we say things like woke and enlightened, you know, it's like one is privileged over the other. Remember, you're talking to somebody who's dyslexic. Okay, so it's very easy to say, well, you didn't see it, you didn't know it. And me, I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I just don't see it. And people are like, that's a horrible excuse. it's how my mind works. It's just simple. You literally almost have to shove my face in it, or because I'm an auditory learner and I have to actually be tactical with it. That's what makes me a nurse. I have to touch what I'm learning in a sense. I have to see it in action. You know what I'm saying? You can't just tell me because it's not going to stick. And I'm not saying that that white people are inherently dyslexic, but when you don't have resources, when you don't have the exposure, you're going to believe it's like Santa Claus. You're not going to believe it exists. It's like, no, it doesn't. And it's like, well, I don't see black people, so how can I be racist? But it's like, well, one of the litmus tests is, how do you feel when you hear Black Lives Matter? Well, that makes me uncomfortable. There you go. Why? Because you automatically feel there's a sense of inferiority and superiority, and you got to get that out of your mind and understand that if they're saying this, there obviously is a problem. But with that being said, you know me, I'm always like, well, give them a chance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good point, though, because, I grew up in California where racial tensions are completely different. I grew up in a small urban agricultural area where, my high school is like 50% Hispanic, so racism wasn't really a thing. And then I've lived in several other states. I went from California to Louisiana, where it was completely different. The polar opposite.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting to realize that everything I thought I knew was wrong, and I had to basically re-educate myself through interactions and making new friends and meeting new people. And you're right. There are so many places where we may be having people talking to their children who've never been in those experiences, who don't understand. And how can you explain something to your child that you don't even really understand?
Exactly.
So it's, wow, what a hard problem. How do we solve something like that?
Well, Dan, we're facing this problem with you. Simply with you being an independent candidate. You are the anomaly. You are, and you are exposing by running running for senator. Is that correct? You're running for senator, and you're running as an independent, not a Democrat, not a Republican, not even a libertarian, which is like, the proverbial redheaded step cousin that like nobody
Republican light is how I heard it.
Republican light, and that's funny. That's funny.
So you are a civilian. You're a civilian that said, I want change. I want to invoke change. I want to be a part of this democratic process, and I want to be a senator for the people. So my question to you, to get off of, sorry, Jared, because we can talk about bias. Yeah, we can talk about implicit bias all day. What made you want to run for Senate?
So I never wanted to be a politician. I didn't wake up when I was a young kid and say, oh, I'm going to be a senator. Bernie Sanders woke me up. He showed me the corruption in the government, and he got me to start doing research for myself. And in 2015 is when I started educating myself on politics, because I was very ignorant before. I was just a regular young guy. I was focused on work and my family and everything else but politics. Well, what he did was he gave me the push to start to look up things for myself. So I started looking up my own representatives. I use two websites which are extremely helpful, OpenSecrets.org and votesmart.org. So with VoteSmart, you can actually enter in a politician's name and you can see how they voted throughout their entire career. So I started with the guy who at the time was controversial was Tom Cotton. So I entered his name in there and I started to see how he's been voting throughout his career. And I saw how he was voting to do things like repeal the Affordable Care Act, cut environmental regulations, protect the coal industry, and basically things that I didn't think were really good for my family or my planet. And so I'm like, why is he voting this way? So then you go to Open Secrets and enter their name in, and you can start to see where their money's coming from. You can start to see, oh, he's taking money from coal lobbyists. Oh, he's taking money from the health industry, the pharmaceutical industry. Maybe that's why he's voting to repeal it. And I started to realize that, wow, maybe this guy is taking a bunch of money in donations, and because of that, he's no longer interested in me and my family. He's getting more and more of those donations. So then I start playing with all sorts of other politicians' names. I think I was on there for so many hours the first time, looking, how people are voting, where their money is coming from. And I started to realize that when it gets to the higher levels of our government, like, you're talking U.S. Senate, the executive branch, a lot of these people are taking money from the same billionaires, from the same corporations. I mean, the military-industrial complex is one of the biggest problems that we have faced in our society as Americans. Yeah. And the military-industrial complex is financing about half and half Republicans and Democrats. And that's kind of why I decided to run as an independent. Is I really believe that a representative should answer to their constituents and not a political party. And when you have a lot of these, billionaires putting money in both Republicans and Democrats' pockets so that those legislators can get elected and then vote how their party wants, I mean, our parties have been bought and paid for. They don't represent us anymore. It doesn't matter if it's the DNC or the RNC. They've been bought and paid for. Look at Mike Bloomberg. He even said on accident on a live interview, he's like, yeah, I've purchased legislators. He's donated to Republicans. He's donated to Democrats. It's all a power game. And the reason that they put these people into power and get them elected into office is because then they can vote on legislation that helps their benefits themselves. It furthers their own financial interests. And that's what is wrong with our government, in my opinion, and why I'm running, is to try to get some of that corruption out of there, to try to bring more public awareness and some public pressure to these legislators who are taking these huge bribes to vote against us. I mean, and I can talk about that and dark money and everything else all day long.
I'm sitting here boiling over here.
Yeah, you're salivating. I can see it. You're like, oh, let me speak.
I'm like, this is my thing, because everybody wants to be divisive. They want to fight you. I have one of my closest, loving, dearest friends. She is a staunch Democrat. And she was literally, if you want to sit here and talk about the right being, aggressive and just blind, I said to her, in 2016, I worked for the state of Pennsylvania in the prison system, the Department of Corrections. Do you know what president put the most prisons on in our country? Yeah, honey, it wasn't a Republican. Republicans don't get excited, okay? Because you all have done some. Y'all, you want to sit here and be party line. I'm all about the people. And Dan, you are pushing the American agenda. I am so happy we got you. Now, unfortunately for the presidency, we can't play with that, because it's just literally like, no, we have to go one way. As much as I want Americans to wake up, so we have to choose one party. But trust and believe, this is a wake-up call to America. We need Dan as senator in Arkansas. Bam! That's going to open this country right up.
And I think it's really a unique opportunity right now where we're at here in our race, because there's no Democrat running. So I really have the best chance to actually beat the incumbent Republican right now than what I would have had if there was a Democrat running. And
now explain why you don't have a Democrat candidate. I'm seeing Monet's face.
Yeah, the GOP blackmailed him out.
Sorry.
So we can get into ballot access and that whole thing. It takes a little while because there's so much to talk about. So the corruption of the GOP. Let's just start with 1 year ago. Tom Cotton reached out to a state senator here in Arkansas and asked him to do him a favor. He asked him to change the requirements for third parties to get ballot access. It was before to require 3% of the last governor vote with a maximum of 10,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Well, he got our state legislators to change the law, and they removed the 10,000 signature cap and raised it up to 26,000. So they tried to make it 3 times harder for third parties to get access on the ballot. While they did this, they actually had dirt on the Democrat, and they knew that they were going to get the Democrat to drop out after the filing deadline. And we know this because Tom Cotton's campaign manager put out a press release stating that this was his plan. It's not a big secret. They weren't even trying to hide it. That was their plan. So they tried to make it harder for third parties. Fortunately, the Libertarian Party actually sued the Secretary of State, John Thurston, and had the signature reduction back down to 10,000. At that point, the Libertarian Party paid a canvassing company $55,000 to get their 10,000 signatures. Now, to get on the ballot as a Republican for your primary, you pay a $20,000 filing fee. As a Democrat, you pay a $12,000 filing fee. And if you're a third party, you need 10,000 signatures. So the Libertarians paid their 55,000, and I don't have a party backing me. So we are completely grassroots, and our signatures came, 98% of them were from unpaid volunteers. And that actually ended up giving us a 91% validity rate, whereas most of the people who pay canvassers get like a 60 to 70% validity rate. Wow. So we had a ton of support. Now, another difference was the Libertarian Party, they don't have a fixed collection period. They got to choose a 90-day window. So they chose last August, September, and October, and they July, August, and September, and they turned in their 10,000 signatures in October. As an independent candidate, I have a fixed collection period. So I had to get my 10,000 signatures between February 1st and May 1st, the coldest months of the year, when there's really not a lot going on. And unfortunately, there was no way for us to foresee COVID-19. And on March 13th, our governor, Asa Hutchinson, issued orders of the state to declare a state of emergency, implementing social distancing practices and banning large gatherings, which severely burdened our collection efforts.
Now, prior to that, though, if I'm not mistaken, you had already started collecting signatures prior to January.
You've been following me a while.
I have.
Yeah.
When you thought that, when you and your campaign thought that you had that window and that extra time, and then the rules changed, said no, deadline now is February 1.
So what had happened was, when I first went to the Secretary of State's office, they gave me the last handbook. And the last handbook had the laws prior to 2020. So that was the handbook that I read, where an independent candidate had until the May 1st deadline, but they could begin collecting signatures on January 1st and have a 90-day window. That way you could collect from January 1st until April 1st, and then you would have 30 days to collect all your petition sheets, to verify them, and do everything else before getting them to the Capitol on May 1st. They changed the laws, and the laws took effect this year. So the handbook I had didn't have the law change in it, where they changed it so that an independent candidate must begin on February 1st, no earlier than, and finish on May 1st. So what that did was that got rid of our 30-day grace period to collect our petitions, to verify, and things like that. So I actually began collecting signatures on February 1st. Well, we did it for a few days back in early January before we saw the law change. So we started on February 1st, and then I actually had to be at the Capitol by 12 o'clock noon in Little Rock on May 1st, which means I really only got like 89 and a half days. And then on top of that, when I got back to Bella Vista and checked my P.O. box, I had like 100 more signatures in there from that day that were turned in. But they don't fill up our P.O. box till 10:30 in the morning. There was no way I could have gotten those signatures, even though they were dated before May 1st. So it's really been stacked against us. So what a long story, it can go on and on, but our original question was the Democrat, what happened? So they found the dirt on the Democrat, not this last May, but the May before, more than a year ago. And while they had the dirt on the Democrat, they tries to raise the signature requirement for third parties. Now, our filing period here in Arkansas, you actually have to file to run for office a year before the election. So our filing period was November 4th, 2019 until November 11th, 2019. 12 o'clock noon, November 11th was the deadline. So at 1 o'clock on November 11th, the GOP issued a press release stating that they were launching an investigation into fraudulent FEC filings into the Democratic candidate. 1 hour after that, he dropped out of the race, 2 hours after the filing deadline, leaving no Democrat in our race.
Wow.
They did everything they could to make sure Tom Cotton was running unopposed. They did not want any choice. They took away Arkansans' choice, is what they did, in a very undemocratic and unethical way. And it all could have been speculation, except his campaign manager decided to put out a press release stating, oh, this was our plan the whole time. We had it for this time. And we waited.
We're waiting.
And they actually even stated that they were going to wait until the Democratic primary and let the one candidate gain traction, and then they would bomb him out afterwards. So it's really corrupt what's going on. I cannot believe that the GOP, that Tom Cotton, that the people helping him, such as the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the governor, these are all ethical implications as to taking money. Well, I guess I forgot to also mention, so our Secretary of State, John Thurston, our Governor, Asa Hutchinson, and our Attorney General, who represents the Secretary of State when being sued in court as his defense counsel, all three of these people have taken money from Tom Cotton. They have taken campaign contributions of him personally, and they have also, he created a PAC, the Rangers Lead the Way PAC, and donated money to them through there as well.
Wait, question.
Uh-huh.
How do you, I just want to know, how did you know this? How did you find this out?
OpenSecrets.org, their FEC filings. It's all public information.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I need popcorn.
They didn't even try to hide it. I mean, and that's just what they didn't try to hide.
No. Netflix ain't got nothing on this. What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Dan,
wow.
you are the man.
Well, hopefully I can get a lot of this information out to as many people as possible.
Oh no. Yeah, that's one of the many reasons why we want you on the show, is like, so that way we can more opportunities to put your name to your face and hear what you have to say and hear what your platform is and hear directly from you. So the more opportunity that
people can understand why this is important.
Exactly.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So,
it is so important. I mean, I haven't even gotten into like my own personal battle through running as an independent and all of that.
Speak on it.
Yeah.
We were going to move to the next question, but
us.
hey, that's a great question.
Um,
how are you personally handling all of this stress? Because we know that you're married, you got a young kid, or at least one young kid.
Yeah, my daughter, she's 7.
Okay.
My wife has been such a trooper throughout this whole process. I mean, it has been extremely stressful. It's an up and down roller coaster. The only thing that's really keeping us going is just the amazing amount of support that we've been getting. And it has been so amazing. We've actually raised more than $50,000 now in small individual contributions. So 100% of our donations are from individual donors. We don't take money from political parties, PACs, or billionaires or giant corporations. And 80% of those donations are in increments less than 200. So a lot of our donations are just working class people that are tired of the status quo and that want change, which is amazing. I mean, the amount of support's just been great. I have a whole team of volunteers. When you run as a party, like if I was running as a Republican, the Republican Party would say, here's your campaign manager, here's your communications director, here's this person, this person, this person, and this person. They've worked on these campaigns. They know what they're doing. All you have to do is just show up and you're good to go. Well, as an independent, it's a lot different.
I'm sure.
All of my people are unpaid. We actually hired our first paid position, which is our fundraising director, because he has experience fundraising.
Okay.
We hired him about 3 weeks ago now, to help us bring some more money in. But everything else has been volunteer, just people who are passionate about replacing Tom Cotton, our communications director. And the one thing we're still missing is a campaign manager. So I've got the whole group of people that we're all trying to fill this role and make appointments and, get everything done ourselves without any political experience. So I think we're doing a pretty good job for being a new team coming in and going to such a big statewide race.
Very awesome. That's just awesome to hear. I will say, and just to test that, the whole to your campaign not the fundraiser manager. Sorry. Just to speak to his efficacy. The last I saw, your donations were averaging about $10,000-$12,000 or something to that effect a week or what have you. And then to hear you say it's now 50,000 above is just, that's awesome.
It's sad to say, but
That-
honestly, we're still getting going with our fundraising, with our email list and things like that. But what's really contributed to our campaign is when Tom Cotton, I hate to use a somewhat curse word, when he makes an ass of himself. That's when our donations really start to come in. When he starts saying really
That's a
stupid things
donkey.
like no quarter, you're really going to suggest using a war crime against American citizens on domestic soil, an overwhelming show of force against protesters, and then his latest debacle, slavery was a necessary evil. Are you kidding me? And when he starts saying dumb stuff like that, the money comes in, and it really helps us because we can use that money to go towards advertising and helping get our name out there, because it would blow your mind how many people still think Tom Cotton is running unopposed because that's what the media says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, every time I see that, I make it a point to say, nope, he's not. Let me introduce you to a guy.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So no, it's really kind of going to what Monet and I were talking about earlier, as far as where our stance is and where we're coming from. I had it for a second and then I lost it. Speaking truth to power. That's it.
That's
right. Truth to power. That was so. You say that if you generally say Cotton's running unopposed, I'm going to tell you, no, he is not.
There's a candidate there.
Yeah, and I can give many more examples of that too. But no, nope. There's an independent candidate, and
And you know what?
For the people.
Good chance. I'm pretty sure we are going to win here in November because enough people are sick and tired of this, and
we're all sick and tired of it.
I know, and it's not even just Arkansans. It's like a lot of Americans and people around the whole world know who this guy is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not one to really want to claim him.
I know, right?
Or claim, it's like, yeah, I'm from Arkansas. Oh, Tom Cotton State. Yeah, okay.
No,
it's not his state. It's the people's state, man.
It is the people's state. It's like, guess what? It's like America. We're looking to Arkansas to show us change, to show us how we're going to take back our country and live like we were supposed to. Okay, the Constitution was one of the greatest documents ever written, ever drafted, and this is coming. I'm not saying it's like all people. Yes, the principles are there. Okay, we just have to follow them. Period.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Dan, we could continue talking your race the entire time, but we do have some other questions that we'd like to get your opinion and answer on. And so now I'm going to hit you with a little bit of a harder one.
Really?
Yeah. You got one too. You got one coming too. Chill.
Okay.
At any rate, because simply you are running for senator, I'm going to label you a politician. I'm going to put that box on you. I'm sorry. And as such, how would you respond, or how do you respond to the white fragility that you undoubtedly see anytime you're talking race relations, especially in Arkansas?
We saw a lot of this at the state capitol last weekend, unfortunately. The first thing you have to do when you're trying to talk to someone who doesn't necessarily understand, whether it's their choice or not, you need to listen to what they have to say. And you have to start by listening, because a lot of people just want to be heard and they want to say their opinion out loud. So the first thing I always try to do is I try to listen. And while I'm listening to what they have to say, I compute a mental list of different points where, they may not be 100% correct. And maybe I can use this as a point to try to, use an analogy to help them realize that maybe they might not be correct. But trying to tell someone they're wrong is impossible. If you tell someone, no, that's not true, that's not how it works, then they are going to put up a barrier and not listen to what you have to say. So you have to be very careful of that. So the first step is listening, and then you have to find cracks in the reasoning. Now, what you do is, as you try to amplify these cracks, one of the ones I got recently was, well, if you tear the statue down, you're erasing history.
That's a very common
That's a very common one. So you have to try to figure out ways to like I said, find an analogy. So a good one to go to for myself that I found is the Berlin Wall. Well, the Berlin Wall was a symbol of oppression, very similar to what these statues are. And when the Berlin Wall came down, did people forget what happened? Did they forget about East and West Germany? It didn't erase history. It just removed a symbol of oppression so that people could start to regain their, I don't want to say dignity, but regain what their lives and their society was pre-occupation.
So dare I say a sense of pride?
Yeah,
or a newly found or rekindled
a newly
pride?
found pride that you can be proud of. And it's really hard, how do you tell someone that they're wrong? And these are all just symptoms of the problem. The problem is a lack of education and a lack of understanding. When we had so many people show up at the Capitol, they thought that the BLM protesters were coming to tear the statue down. Well, I had spent I feel like 3 hours with the BLM protesters before it even started, talking to people. That we weren't going down there to tear the statue down. That was not the point of this protest. It was a peaceful demonstration to show our support of removing the Confederate statue. So immediately, the whole group of people that were there were ready for violence, expecting violence, and a lot of them even wanted violence. They were hoping it would happen. They were ready for a war zone on Capitol grounds. And if these people only understood that we're going to go through the legal process to get the statue down, we're not going to tear it down, we're not violent, we don't want to erase your history, we just want this statue that is private property. It's not like a big historical reference. I mean, most of these statues were created in the 1920s and during the civil rights movement, mass produced and distributed throughout the country. It's not like it is so-and-so Confederate soldier, standing guard at the Capitol where he died or something like that. It is literally a symbol of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And look at Germany. There are no Nazi statues in Germany, period. They removed them all, whether or not it was a historical statue or it's just a symbol. They removed them all. Do you think Germans forgot about the Nazi regime?
No, because
they have museums.
The camps are still
museums. We just actually here up in Northwest Arkansas in Bentonville, we got them to agree to move their statue from the Bentonville Square because it's owned by the daughters of the Dixieland Daughters of the Confederacy.
Oh yeah.
Or something like that. And we got them to agree to move it to a private plot of land where it belongs. It's not a public symbol. So there is a legal process to it. I'm pretty sure KIPP is actually going through and working on getting the legal process right now going, I think, through petitioning and things like that. So it's just so much misunderstanding. And how do you reason with someone who doesn't even want to learn? All you can do is
and that's why we do the show, Dan. This is why we do this show. Because I'm the same way, and like you hit really good points. First, start out with listening. Find either the crack or the common ground to get you to open up and amplify that, like you said, that crack or that misunderstanding, and then be empathetic. Listen, understand, and educate. So that's what we've been talking about. What, for how long? Several weeks now, Monet?
I like that. Listen, understand, and educate. I hope you don't mind if I take that.
Enjoy. Yes, Senator Whitfield.
Better get used to that.
But I've still got so much to learn. I'm not going to lie. And it's just really hard because, being a white adult male, I will never fully understand. It helps having, an immigrant wife, seeing the way people treat her, but I'll never really understand what it feels like to be her and to be treated that way. So it's just so hard.
You're right.
It's just hard.
That's where the empathy comes in. Like, I don't know. Okay, so people are going to be like, what, Monet? I don't know what it is to be a man. Like you would never know what it is to have a child. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We're accepting these differences and saying, you know what? Because we're so foreign with those ideologies to each other, with those understandings of each other, we're then going to humanize ourselves. We're going to kind of be receptive to what, like I'm listening to you as a white man saying, I don't know what it is to be a minority. And that sounds to me like you're invoking your empathy. You're trying to say, I want to empathize with other Americans that may feel oppressed. And to me, that's just amazing. That opens the door for a lot of change, and not necessarily like, you know, we don't want to have a cancel culture. Thank you. Where we just want to say, okay, this is right, this is wrong, and we're just throwing things away. It's an understanding. Like Jared said, what is your new platform to Senator Whitfield? You said, listen,
understand, and educate.
There you go. Listen, understand, and educate. So, and that goes to everything. At least say why, ask the question, and then listen. Try to find an understanding with further communication, and then we educate. So I say all of this to say, one of my questions was, if I'm not mistaken, Jared, you say you want to defund the police department, but I was saying, are we looking more towards reconstruction? Re-education?
I think reforming the police is the best way to go about it.
Mm-hmm. But then lay that out. How would you do that? Because there's been a lot of different complete abolishment, defunding completely, and just misunderstanding of what defund actually means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think defund was just a bad term to use because
from the beginning.
It created a word that they could be like, oh, they wanted, you know, it can be, you know, misconstrued as remove funding or remove the police.
Yes.
You know, who knows what it means? That's why I think reform is a really good word.
Yes.
Because, you know, and again, it's so hard because why were police created? Police were created to help capture slaves. Mm-hmm. So
that was the first police force in the United States.
And so why do we have police in the first place? Do we still need police today? But our society is a lot different 100 years later. And we do need police, but we don't need police in the way that they are now. I think personally, police should be like firefighters. They should be chilling, playing video games, watching TV, unless they're called.
And you know, no offense to the firefighter.
Right.
No, absolutely not. They're the unseen heroes that save lives every day. But they should be there when called. They shouldn't be going around profiling people. Stop and frisk policies, speed traps. And a lot of, like, I live in Bella Vista. We're a really, really heavily policed town. I work at Domino's on the weekends. I've been there like 5 years, and I did closing for a year where I'd get off at like 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And I'd have cops following me home all the freaking time, literally from the parking lot all the way to the road I lived on. I had coworkers who would leave the parking lot and get pulled over across the street. One of them, because his windows were tinted too dark. So they pulled him over, they took him out of his car, searched his whole car, left everything out on the side of the road. And then they're like, okay, have a good night. Someone got pulled over for his exhaust was too loud, but he has stock exhaust on his car. It's not like he modified it. They searched his car, left it on the side of the road. Have a good night. One of my coworkers was walking to work. And he got stopped walking to work down the road, and they ran his driver's license, and they told him, he was a younger kid. He's like, yeah, they stopped me, and they just wanted to make sure that I wasn't a suspicious guy, so they ran my information. Like, it's okay, but that's that's not right, that's, but a lot of people don't understand what their rights are. So we have to make sure that our police officers, they're not revenue officers. They're not there to just make money for the state. They're not there to harass people or to profile. They need to be there to protect and serve when they're called and when they're needed. So, but how do we do that? And that comes with a whole system of reform. Number one, who are our police officers? We have a lot of people that have no business being police officers. They don't have the mental capacity for it. They don't have the empathy for it, the understanding, the patience, and things like that. And then we also need to raise our educational requirements. I've been pulled over before. Like the one ticket I've gotten was because I turned left onto a 4-lane road that had a merging lane in the middle. So I turned left and I sat in the merging lane until the traffic passed, and then I merged in and went, and he pulled me over and said, "This is a loading zone. You can't merge out of that lane." So I took his ticket, I went home and I did some research, and hey, go figure, you can merge in that lane for up to 250 feet. And so many, we're getting tickets from people who don't understand the law. How can you uphold the law if you don't even understand it? So we need to make sure that police officers understand the law that they're supposed to be upholding. We need to make sure that they are getting annual de-escalation training, because one of the main purposes of a law enforcement officer is to show up and assess and then de-escalate and use the minimum force necessary. When we are seeing far too many times when officers are showing up, they are using deadly force before anything else. Just show up, deadly force, good to go. And I mean, it's insane that that's something that's even acceptable. And that's why we're seeing in America more, police murders, I'm going to call them murders, of unarmed American citizens than in any other country in the world. And these are all problems that we have to fix. And at the same time, how do you get better quality, better educated police officers? We have to raise their salaries. We cannot be paying police officers $30,000 a year to go put their lives on the line and, kiss their wife and their kid in the morning and not know if they're coming home, because it's just not fair. You're not going to get, the right people taking such a dangerous job when you could just go get an associate's degree and make $50,000 a year and not have to worry about coming home every night. So we do need better pay. Here in Arkansas, the average law enforcement salary is $36,000 a year.
Wow.
Which is, it's very low, and we have to raise their pay. And I think if we start to raise their pay, then we can begin to expect them to start leading by example, because we have to make sure that our law enforcement, that our elected officials, that anybody in a position of authority starts leading by example. And that, for right now, that means wearing a freaking mask. Wear a mask. If you're a cop, wear a mask. If you're an elected official, wear a mask. Lead by example.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. I mean, I'm a psych. I also have psych nurse background, and I worked in the like I said, Department of Corrections. I've worked in the private sector, and I'm telling you, when I literally have to face an assailant or someone that has committed a crime, I have to approach them with very tactical hands. The police should also be doing the same thing. But with that being said, we also, me being devil's advocate, I'm sorry, we have to have a culture. Our society has to be, how shall I say this? We have to teach our children, don't steal. We have to do this also. We have to work in conjunction on a positive note, because as an African American, as a Black American, I know for a fact at the age of 4, I had an inherent fear of police, and I didn't know where it came from. What was I doing it for? It is definitely within our in minorities' culture to be afraid, be weary, and don't trust. Absolutely don't trust. So that aspect, that social aspect, has to be faced. And there has to be if you're in this particular community, you have to be a part of the community, not necessarily living in the community, but be familiar with the individuals in the community to create a relationship. For police,
and I think we have to address those problems simultaneously. That way, our next generation won't even have to worry about that.
No.
But you have to do them both at the same time. You can't do one or the other.
Absolutely.
They want to say Blue Lives Matter, but when you're talking to, and I'm 45 years old, I'm afraid of you. I don't care. I'm afraid of the police. I have an inherent fear of the police, period. Now, am I doing anything wrong? Absolutely not. I'm daydreaming, honestly, and I have to stop doing that when I drive. But I do too much while I'm driving. But anyway,
she didn't admit that on tape. I'm just saying.
Did I? No, I mean literally. Don't, Jared. I'm like,
I know.
Me.
You're good.
Because I will continue to text you. No, that's not good. That's not good. Okay.
All right, you digress.
Go to the drive.
I'll be like, I'll turn around and be like, pass me my sandwich. Oh, woo! We missed that one. I got lots of
Let me get
sandwiches.
back in my lane. My bad.
Yeah, right?
All right, Monet.
Maybe I should be scared. Anyway, but no, it's socially and as far as the reform is concerned, yeah. So it's not defunding, and I want some of the right to stop screaming that Blue Lives Matter. Oh, everybody, here we go. All right, sorry.
And yeah, going back to your first question, or going back to your first point, that could also be a litmus test for racism. You know, when you say Blue Lives Matter, you know, who's coming out of the woodwork, so to speak.
Yeah, what I'd like the big pushback I get is, well, what about how many, how many white people killed white people, how many black people killed black people, and things like that. And it's like,
well,
comparing apples to carrots.
Not even the same fruit. Not even fruit.
No, not even a fruit.
I like it. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Just, yeah, well, yeah, of course, white people killing white people, black people killing black people. That's called
racial profiling. That's the big problem. And I mean, we know for a fact when the FBI came out with the report that a lot of Klan members did infiltrate our law enforcement over the last several decades. I mean, it's not a secret. That is a fact.
Well, see, I'm glad we're talking to you because I've learned several new things already in the course of this conversation. So
I swear to you, I did not know.
Yeah, let's see if I can pull it up.
No, I mean, yes. I hope people, when they listen to this podcast, whether they're doing the dishes or they're exercising, that they take the time to pause, go back, replay, write down these websites. I mean, honestly, Jared, I'm really thinking we need to put what some of Senator Whitfield said.
I caught that.
I mean, that's pbs.org from October 21st, 2016. FBI warned of white supremacists in law enforcement 10 years ago. It's just crazy everything that's going on, but there's so much going on at the same time. It's so hard to catch everything. I mean, we're not even talking about, what is that woman's name? Epstein's pimp.
Goliath, whatever her name is.
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah,
there we go. I mean, we're not even talking about her anymore. And she can literally implicate some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world to child, rape. It's crazy. But we're not even talking about it. We're not talking about it.
Because the wealthy don't want us to.
They don't, because they're all going to get implicated.
They're going to get it. They're like, it's like.
But we have to make sure we don't stop talking about these things because they'll just get forgotten. I mean, we're not talking about Julian Assange anymore, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, any of these things that, these whistleblowers basically gave up their, freedom or their lives to let us know, but people aren't really talking about it anymore. We have to make sure that we keep talking about this stuff.
That goes back to Jared's question about implicit bias and the media saying, because we already know. We learned this in history as Americans. We know how we're easily controlled. Mm-hmm. And to bring power back to the people and make us realize, hey, we have responsibilities in this country. And yes, the protests will continue only because people need to say, okay, let's sit down and talk.
And I mean, most of the protests are peaceful. A lot of the problem is the law enforcement agitation. Like we've seen in Portland, now that there's no federal troops, they've been protesting every night peacefully. There's been no rioting is what they would call it, but.
Yeah, I think the last news story I heard on that was there was a dumpster fire and protests, and some of the, I don't know if I don't think it was obviously not a member of the protesters, but dumpster fire, and then protesters came to try to put out the fire. So that's the worst that's happened since the feds have left.
I mean, I went to the
Protesting, guys,
BLM protest and I listened to, a lot of the pre-protest stuff and preparing. And one of the things that they make very clear is there will be no violence. And if you see an agitator, if you see someone in our group who doesn't belong here, someone who's, like agitating or instigating violence, you grab that person and you put them outside of the group. They are not with us.
The same thing. They did the same thing at one of the first BLM protests in Fayetteville. So I was at that one, and a couple of the event coordinators and some of the social activists, DeAndre Jones was one of them. We interviewed him last week. That was one of the very first things, like, this is not going to get violent. This is not going to get into a riot. We are going to stay peaceful. And if you don't like, and if you see somebody, and then everybody's queuing, everybody's like, no, no, no. And we're all doing this in unison. And so the message is really clear at the very beginning that, no, this will stay peaceful. And there was a couple of times where I was like, but then of course I reckon, looking back, that was just my discomfort, never actually being to a protest before. So I'm like, okay. So I was able to reckon with that discomfort and push through, and it was a really awesome experience. So, but it was funny because we're all expecting to march. 3 hours later, we finally marched, but we can only march around the square. I don't know if you've been to Fayetteville.
It's not very large.
You just got that one square around the old courthouse, and that's it. And so and they're like, all right, we're going to start marching. And we're just going to have to stay in the circle because that's where our barricades are. That's where, and as we're marching, everybody can start peacefully dispersing. And so I took that. I marched a little bit and went and met my wife where she picked me up. And while I was doing that, I'm having a random conversation with a homeless guy on the steps of the church I go to. And that was a good conversation, actually, because he didn't know what was going on, why there's people there. And so I got to hear his story and just had a good connection with that, just a random stranger. At any rate, all that to say, to prove your point, it's just amazing that they still want to keep it peaceful, and they let it be known from the beginning. And so that just goes to the point that it's two separate groups, two separate agendas, two separate issues going on, and we need to have our critical thinking skills and be able to recognize the two groups.
It's the evolution. Yeah, the evolution of the people. We're not primates. I'm going to keep saying this so people realize we're not primates. We have our prefrontal cortex is finished. It's molded. We're able to think and comprehend. It is time for us to start utilizing the intelligence that we are acquiring instead of going to that primal, like, fight, anger, beat. No, we're not doing that anymore. It's time to think. It's time for us to be citizens of the country and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be spoon-fed anymore. What are you doing for us? And who are you taking care of? Okay, are you taking care of the people? Or are you taking care of the wealthy? Because it's not because one of the extremes is going to happen. Now, please, somebody argue this with me. Not argue, but please enlighten me. If we want a productive capitalist system, greed, it cannot be in the equation. Okay, because once greed is injected, you then either turn into socialist or what?
The problem is greed is always going to be there because that is an inherent trait. So how do we make capitalism work? I consider myself a social capitalist. I understand the benefits of capitalism in a free market, but then I also see the problems that crony capitalism, brings forward and that we face when we allow capitalism to purchase the rest of our government. Because basically, our government is owned by the capitalists right now. And that's a big problem because we're now allowing those capitalists to set their own regulations, which regulations are put in place to protect consumers, our health, our well-being, and our finances. We're allowing them to deregulate themselves. We are allowing them to, sell us food and chemicals that cause cancer, even though they know it, but they're still selling it to us to make a profit. We're also allowing them to evade taxes, which is one of the biggest problems. I mean, theoretically, supply side economics, Reaganomics, or trickle down, theoretically, it does work It's actually trickling down, but it's not. All of our money is going up, and instead of trickling down, it goes up, and then it goes into offshore banks to avoid taxation. And that money never comes back into our society because the people at the top are greedy and they have put their own financial interests ahead of the rest of our society, which is why we're seeing 1% of the people in America taking in 83% of the wealth gained. We need to stop judging ourselves and how amazing our country is by the economic growth of the richest 1/10 of 1%, and instead start judging ourselves by how happy the poorest of us are, how the vulnerable are taken care of.
Yes.
But how do we do that? You have to get money out of politics. And how do you get money out of politics? You have to either vote out the people in the legislative branch that have been purchased by these corporations, or you have to somehow get these legislators to vote on legislation that's going to take money out of their pockets. So it's hard. And, that's why Bernie Sanders started the movement. He did his job. He woke people up. He woke millions of people up.
We need to be green. We need to be green. We are an embarrassment. And I don't care what anybody says. And I've traveled around the world. I have. And I'm telling you, in 2006, 7, I was like, let's be funny. Let's go to Canada for Thanksgiving, okay? Because that's funny. The kids have off. We're going on vacation, go to Canada and celebrate Thanksgiving. Well, let me tell you something. I was mortified when I was like, yo, their milk is in plastic bags. And then the cabin that we stayed in, the people came to us and was like, you got to sort your trash. You can't just throw it out. And that was like, how many years ago? And it's dawning on me now, like, America, we are so behind the ball, all because of capitalism. And I love capitalism. I mean, my father was an import-export broker. He traveled around the world and was able to connect, industry with, business and so forth and so on. And I understand how it works when it works well. But we are missing the ball on so many levels. Yes, this is another little something we're putting in the pot. Yes, our EPA, come on, people. Jared's laughing because he's like, Monet, nobody wants to live in a cave. All right, that's a little aggressive.
I didn't say that. Don't be, no, you don't. I'm with you. I'm all about living on the land and not necessarily like going out and hunting my own stuff, but whatever is available, if it's in season, I'm going to eat what's in season. If it's available, that's great. If that's not available, then I got to pick something else. So, geothermal energy, wind energy, sustainable food source.
Well, that's again, and that just comes back to money and politics, because we really should at this point be 100% renewable. We can be, but the problem is the oil industries are the wealthiest companies in the world. They have so much money, people don't even understand how much money they have because they use these legal loopholes to break down into shell companies and then send their money offshore and things like that. I worked in the oil field for 2 years, so I saw this firsthand.
Wow.
I saw, so there are so many oil rigs in the Gulf. It would blow your mind. I mean, there must be 100,000 of them, because you can be out 50 miles into the ocean and you can be looking around and there's an oil rig, there's an oil rig, there's an oil rig, there's an oil rig. There's so many of them.
Wow.
And these offshore rigs, some of them, they can cost like $350,000 per day to drill. $350,000 per day to drill. And what they'll do is they'll go out to a new well and they will drill for 90 days at $350,000 per day, and they only have like a 1% chance of finding oil or gas. That's how much money they spend trying to find it. So imagine how much they make when they actually
get it. Oh my gosh.
And it's just amazing. So the problem is that the fossil fuel industry has been putting money into our politicians' pockets. They've been putting money into our schools. We saw in Oklahoma that I think it was ExxonMobil put like $1 million into the school system, and now they're teaching how fracking is good for our planet and things like that.
Yes, because that's totally safe for us people.
Totally safe. Don't you like earthquakes?
Yeah. No, love waking up.
Oh,
that's
man.
just awesome.
So we have to figure out how to get the money out of it. And as soon as we can figure out how to get money out, then we can start moving towards things like making sure every single house in America has solar energy. Honestly, it's not that expensive right now to buy the solar panels to put on your house. Where it comes in being into a problem is when you pay a company like Shine Solar to come in and give you like a 30, you know, I'm going to pay this much a month, which is going to be less than my electric bill over 30 years, where realistically you're paying like 4 times as much, you know, just in interest. So it's not really feasible because of all the interest you're paying. So we need to just have a, you know, a come to moment and be like, you know what, we need to reduce our carbon imprint, and we need to make sure we're not burning as many fossil fuels for electricity as we have been. So we are going to spend $1 trillion and make sure every house has solar panels. And then we can save money instead of spending $1 trillion on fossil fuel subsidies, and just use that money to do it instead. We need to make sure thorium is extremely important. We need to start converting all of our uranium reactors to thorium reactors immediately. So thorium, a lot of people don't know about it. Back in the 70s, they actually were experimenting with thorium energy and uranium energy. These are both nuclear sources. And thorium was coming out ahead in every single aspect. It was cleaner. The isotopes break down. I think it's like 10,000 years faster or something like that. It's cheaper. It's way more abundant. And one of the most important things about it is when a meltdown begins, if you remove the fuel source, the reaction stops immediately.
Wow.
So you can prevent a meltdown by the click of a
3
button.
Mile Island.
You don't have to worry about things like Chernobyl and Fukushima. It's not possible with thorium because you just remove the fuel source and then the reaction stops. It doesn't have to keep going until there's no fuel left.
Wow.
I'm loving you. I'm loving you, dead.
But
Senator
we found out
Whitfield.
something in the 70s. The government found out that you can turn the waste from uranium into weapons, into bombs. And that's why we went with uranium instead of thorium. For bombs. Since World War II, since World War II ended, we've spent $6.8 trillion building nuclear bombs, and we have not used one in an act of hostility. $6.8 trillion.
Since World War II, I will
Fear, primitive mentality. Fear.
Yes. It's crazy.
We're not primates anymore.
Not that I'm doubting you, but you've just actually spurred a conversation that I'd like to have with my cousin, who actually is an engineer at or I think he's actually a supervisor now, but at Nuclear One in Russellville.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
because I would love to see their reactor converted to thorium. And from last I heard, an inspector actually claimed that they're not up to standards, that they might even have to shut that reactor down in the next 10 years unless they can pay like $25 million to repair it. And the average cost to convert a uranium reactor to a thorium is about $20 million. So it could even be cheaper, more feasible to do that. And there are many other countries like India and China who are already working on their liquid sodium reactors, their thorium reactors. So we're falling behind. And, you know, and that's just thorium and solar and things like that. We haven't even gotten into like electric transit, into mass electric transit, to high-speed rails and things like that as well. We could make our, we could be the Jetsons, man, but we got the fossil fuel industry holding us back.
Because of greed, gluttony, and inability to change. Look at the dinosaurs in office. This is where the change needs to come. People, you want to change, let's change. I'm willing, I'm ready.
We're starting to see it around the country, though. We're seeing these incumbents who've been in Congress for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years getting beaten by progressives right now. So
do it.
I'm feeling positive. We're moving in the right direction. I just hope we can do it sooner rather than later.
And I hope we keep the momentum going.
Yeah. I'm gonna donate to your candidacy, even though I'm from Philadelphia. I'm living in Philadelphia right now. And when you win, I'm coming to dinner.
Absolutely.
Jared,
I'm always going to meet with constituents.
No, you're not throwing me under the. You're not throwing me under there on that one. Nope.
Jared and Peter are coming to dinner. Look how I drag him.
I know. Yeah. No. I'm sitting here telling no, and she's like, "No, I'm going to do it anyway."
Oh man, one of the cool things about my campaign actually is you can go to replacetomcotton.com, click on the expenses tab, and you can see where I've spent every single penny donated to my campaign as well.
I've done it.
Full
It's
100% complete transparency.
it's there, and yeah, that's not just a politician spouting things. It's true.
Let's see. I just got my July one updated yesterday. So July was our most expensive month so far, and we spent $7,519.44. And I broke it down all the way to spending $2.40 at UPS to mail out something for a store order.
Wow,
All the way broken down 100%.
that's awesome.
Even my 19 cents for the federal government tax withholding. It's all there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hey, Dan, we're down to about the last 10 minutes of our time, and it's not our time. We're actually are constrained by Zoom.
Sorry, I can talk forever.
No, so can we.
No, we love it.
So can we. But I would like to ask you one last question, because it's been hinted on by you and by Monet. Monet said something about evolution of thought, and Dan, you continue to hit education and emphasize the need for that, despite the fact that there's just so much there that we don't know, because it wasn't information given to us. So within that, in that spirit, I want to ask you, as soon as I pull up my thing again, my question. Would you be willing and able to please speak to your own experiences from what I call awakening from? Well, I don't call it that. I've just picked it up from Ibram Kendi. But awakening from the white dream, this falsehood of white supremacy, the socialization of the systemic racism that we were brought into. So it's within that I'm asking if you don't mind speaking to those experiences of your evolution of thought.
So I grew up in a very conservative household. My parents divorced when I was pretty young, and my mom's family is, we're all military, all law enforcement. My grandfather, he was actually an undercover narcotics officer, specializing in the Hells Angels in Fremont and Oakland, California, back in the 60s and 70s during the Civil Rights Movement. And he was very anti-Black Panther, very anti-Civil Rights Movement. I grew up thinking that Martin Luther King was a terrorist that taught criminals how to make Molotov cocktails to kill cops. Wow. That was the kind of upbringing that I had. So I grew up in a very racist household. I had no idea what was really going on in the world, only one very skewed, misinterpreted side. And then I was very fortunate to be able to move to Louisiana and to start to create my own experiences as a young adult, and to meet new people, and to start to re-educate myself, and to see that everything that I was taught as a kid was wrong. I mean, I had no idea. My eyes I thought they were open, but they were really closed. And it's been just such a transformation from where I was 15 years ago to where I am today because of this. Since college, I've done many papers on, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I've researched the Black Panthers, and I've seen how there weren't even a bunch of criminals and thugs. Realistically, they were a group of people who had done more for their community than the government even could do. They were giving lunches, they were teaching children, they were giving them places to go before and after school, in safe environments. I mean, like, a lot of the Black Panthers that would go around in cars with guns, they were literally just going around following cops to make sure cops weren't beating people on the side of the road. And when they started doing this, the police brutality went down in the area. I was so misinformed. And to go out to Louisiana, because Louisiana, wow, like what a change that was. I didn't have any family out there. I had to make all new friends. And just talking to people and listening to experiences and starting to see the differences in life and upbringing and the struggles that people have had to go through, struggles that I would have never even known someone would even have to go through, like eating bologna sandwiches every single day, 7 days a week, like one a day. I mean,
Just to survive.
Just to survive and trying to figure out how to pay the bills and having to go figure out how to slang and make some money, to pay rent for your mom because your mom can't afford it. I mean, there's just so much that so many people don't understand what's going on.
Dan, they're doing the same thing with Black Lives Matter. I don't know too much about the organization itself, and we touched on this in previous episodes. But if you look at the history you're referring to now, they're doing it now. They're literally like, Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. And it's like, not what I see. But you guys are okay with living with the KKK? I don't want to, please come at me a different way. And then you want to use people like Candace Owen and who are these people? No, you don't have a point of reference. Cut it out. You really need to listen to the people.
Dan, thank you for your time.
No problem.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
That was just as like a young adult, and then marrying a Filipina immigrant. I mean, we moved up here to Bella Vista in Arkansas, and it was just such a big change to the point where, we're at church, and at the end of service, it's like, peace be with you. And, you greet the people on both sides of you. And I remember so crazy, our first time, she goes to shake the hand of the little old woman next to her, and the woman just looks at her and turned her back to her, wouldn't say anything, shake her hand. It's like, this is, that was 2015. It's like, why is this happening? But that's just the way it is. And, I really hope that we can start to solve the problems that are, stemming these symptoms we've been seeing everywhere. And I know I'm very faithful that I have a lot of faith in the fact that our children are going to do it if we can. They're so much smarter than us. They have this freedom of information that we never had. They don't have to worry about growing up to be an adult completely ignorant, not knowing what's going on outside of their little closed environment. They have this big expanse of information, and I'm really hoping that they will be the ones to solve this. I mean, as I hit on earlier, racism, it's not inherent, it's taught. And as soon as we stop teaching our kids to hate, that's going to be when we stop having to suffer through this racial division that should have never been here in the first place. Because racism and slavery, it was not a necessary evil.
It was not.
To say the least. Dan, where can we find you if we want to extend our support? What social media outlets, your website, what can we do actively to help support you?
So replacetomcotton.com is my website, and you can see my phone numbers on there, my email, you can text me, reach out to me personally if you ever have questions. You can also donate through my website if you like what you see. There's a policy tab that covers my million policy stances that are on there. Sorry, it's kind of long. It is under construction. We're actually going out and spending a 4-day tour this weekend, filming around the state to create my policy videos. That way, instead of reading a big old thing about policy, and just click a video and listen to me talk about it. But all my policies on there, my expenses, our lawsuit, all of that information for Ballot Access is on there. Just check out replacetomcotton.com. If I go down, I think you can kind of see.
There you go. There it is.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there any other thing that you got a couple more minutes? Is there something else that you would like to say to leave us with that you didn't get an opportunity to say earlier that we might have cut you off on?
Sorry.
I said we.
I mean, not that I can think of offhand.
Okay. Well, with that being said, Mr. Dan Whitfield, thank you for your time. You definitely have my vote, and we'll be pushing for you. We'll be advocating for you.
I'm praying.
Oh, thank you, Monet. I appreciate it, Jared.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you like what you heard Mr. Dan Whitfield, you can find him you can find him at replacetomcotton.com. If you like what you hear from us from this episode, you can find us TNT TNTW/MJ. That's on Facebook or Twitter. We're also on YouTube. TNT with Monet and Jared. You can also find us Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify. So you can find us. Join the conversation. Please give us your insight. Give us your story. Give us your story. Give us your questions. We want to hear from you. This is not a one-sided conversation. So with that, Monet, what is our final word?
Well, we just hope and pray that this change is continuous. We know for a fact that Senator Whitfield is going to be in office in November. We're going to work very hard for that. Trust me.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
And we love you all very much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Whitfield. You have a great weekend. Good luck on your tour. Be safe in your travels. Wear your mask. Lead by example. All that good stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Till next time.